A reaction is pouring in after a Christian teacher wins a $575,000 settlement from a school district near Richmond, Virginia. Peter Fleming refused to use male pronouns to refer to a female student who believed that she was a boy. Instead, he called the student by her preferred new name. Still, in 2018, he was dismissed by the West Point School Board. Fleming's lawsuit initially was thrown out by a lower court before being reconsidered by the state Supreme Court. Lions Defending Freedom worked on the case after the state Supreme Court victory. In it, it said in part, quote, Peter wasn't fired for something he said. He was fired for something he couldn't say.
As part of his lawsuit against the school board that fired him, he got the axe for failing to use a transgender student's preferred pronouns. Mike Emanuel's on that story with more today. Now, Mike, where does it go today? Hello.
Bill, good morning. This teacher offered some accommodation to the transgender student, but was fired after being ordered to use masculine pronouns.
This is 2018. One of my favorite students, a very good student with whom I had a good rapport. This is her third year in my class because I'm the only French teacher for all levels of French. She was working her way up in levels of French and announced that she was no longer a girl, but was a boy, and said she'd like to be called another name, which I adopted. I adopted her new name. But when my school administration understood that I was using the new name, but I wasn't pronouncing masculine pronouns, now in class, I wasn't going out of my way to pronounce feminine pronouns. I was avoiding feminine pronouns from referring to her, but I wasn't pronouncing masculine pronouns. And when my administration found out, they wanted to make sure that I became a true believer and would start pronouncing masculine pronouns even when the student wasn't present or even when we were just between faculty members. And for me, that was totalitarianism, and it didn't line up with my worldview about who we are as men and women. And so I refused, and that ended in my termination.
Let's bring in your lawyer, Michael. The school board argued that Fleming violated the school's anti-discrimination policy. The attorney who represented the school board and the school administration said, quote, a public school employee is not at liberty to declare that he will not comply with a neutrality applicable policy that's part of his duties as a classroom teacher. Based on what Peter was saying, he was trying to do this differently, but what do you make of this and what the response has been?
Sure. So as Peter just shared, he really went out of his way to accommodate the student. He was willing to use the student's new preferred name. He was willing to avoid using pronouns altogether. But what he couldn't do is speak messages that go against his core beliefs and his core convictions. The school board took the position that, no, you work for us, you're a school teacher, and therefore you're basically a government mouthpiece. We can force you to endorse our viewpoint on even controversial ideological issues like gender identity. And what the Supreme Court of Virginia held last Thursday is no, that violates the Virginia Constitution, and really a historic victory for free speech and for free exercise of religion, and a victory that we hope will have ripple effects throughout this country on this compelled pronoun issue.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. That's a really interesting point. Peter, when you hear this, again, now you can make your arguments. You're given a second chance. Do you still hold firm your beliefs, by the way, that you would identify students as their pronouns given at birth, or just, really try to avoid them, maybe just call them by their name? Would you do it the same way?
I wouldn't go out of my way to provoke my students. But at the same time, pronouns, they mean something. Words mean something, and pronouns in particular, third-person pronouns, designate if a person is a man or a woman, a girl or a boy. So I would do the same thing in regarding, I was not going to refer to her as him, but I wasn't going to try to provoke her nonetheless.
Chris, I want to go to this. Back in April, the 7th Circuit ruled an Indiana high school did not violate federal anti-discrimination law by forcing a music teacher to quit after he refused on religious grounds to use transgender students' preferred pronouns. Does this hurt your case?
So that decision was by a single federal court of appeals that didn't affect the legal arguments we were making in our case because we brought this lawsuit under Virginia's Constitution. And what the Virginia Supreme Court said in our case is that, Virginia has a unique and historic history of protecting religious freedom. It's really the birthplace of religious freedom in this country. And for that reason, Virginia Supreme Court decided, our Constitution protects religious beliefs like Peter's across the board. And for that reason, we were able to secure this huge victory for him. And again, we're optimistic that, for example, the case that you mentioned, that's really going to be just a blip on the radar. And we're going to see this turning of the tide where teachers' rights are really going to start being affirmed once again.
For more on this case, let's bring in Caleb Dalton, Senior Counsel at Alliance Defending Freedom. Caleb, good to be with you today. So what more can you tell us about this case? And really, what was at the heart of it here?
Tracy, thanks so much for having me. At the heart of this case was whether or not the government can compel conformity to an ideology, can compel a teacher to lie. And we're thankful that when the Virginia Supreme Court heard this case, they said the answer to that is a resounding no. In the United States of America and the Commonwealth of Virginia, you cannot compel a teacher to tell a lie. And everybody, whether or not you agree with Peter's position on this, should applaud that ruling because this protects the right of free speech for all Americans.
Yeah, and Caleb, Peter sued the school district for being fired, but the lower court originally dismissed the case, and then he appealed, and it went on to the state Supreme Court. What was the reasoning why the lower court didn't take up the case in the first place?
Well, the lower court actually didn't give any rationale for its opinion. It dismissed the case from the bench, which was astounding, especially given the importance of free speech and free exercise in the Commonwealth of Virginia. The Commonwealth here had a free exercise clause that was the model for the country before our First Amendment was even passed. And we're thankful that that ruling was so strong. We think it should be a model for other states and even the federal government around the country, because the First Amendment is worth protecting. Free speech is for everyone, whether or not you agree with Peter or not. You shouldn't agree with a totalitarian ideology that says your neighbor, via the power of the government, gets to tell you what you can and can't say. So we're thankful that that freedom is protected for him and for teachers around the Commonwealth.
And let's talk about your client now, Peter. It's been quite some time since that first case was filed. What has he been doing in between, and how is he doing now? What was his reaction to this ruling?
Well, he's thankful that he can move on to a new chapter in his life. The last 6 years have been tough. He was ostracized from the teaching community. He was a stellar teacher, beloved in his community. He coached the soccer team. He drove the school bus, contributed to his school community there, and was ostracized from what he loved doing. So it's been tough, but he's excited now to be able to stand up for the rights of everyone, of other teachers who may not have been in the same position as him, or maybe who are considering whether or not they can stand up and do the right thing in a tough situation. He did that. He paid a high penalty at first, but we're thankful that he at least got some recompense for it in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. Not a whole lot of time left, but what's next for him, and also next for the school district?
Yeah, so I'll hit the school district first. The school district has adopted new policies that the governor of Virginia's task force put forth. So the policies have already been changed to protect other teachers in the school district. We're thankful for that. And for Peter, he's now working for a French Christian book publishing company, and trying to provide for his family that way. Because he was ostracized, there was true, real consequences from what the school board did to him and his family.
Well, we're going to leave right there. Caleb, thank you so much for coming on, explaining all this to us.